one thing that we have to talk about in government, one of the big constraints, maybe the biggest, is the path to production. Everything that we've talked about, learning fast, being able to talk to users, all of these things depend on our ability to get our software into production. And one of the, or at least what I thought one of the biggest barriers coming into my own journey in this space was RMF. And an interesting thing happened. I thought this about the FAR too, and Dan Ward early on, he's written a number of books, but he's got this thing called the FAR Guide. I highly recommend you check it out. Dan Ward, I think it's thedanward.com or .org, but you can find his FAR Guide. It basically goes through and shows how every single thing that we think about the FAR is pretty much wrong. And almost everything we want to do is actually explicitly encouraged, not just allowed, but explicitly encouraged by the FAR. And as I read through RMF, I found the exact same things. And the path to production wasn't really about fixing RMF. It was a lot about fixing architectures and fixing cultures. So I'm really excited to have Angel with me here today to talk through this. She is the CISO at the Army Software Factory, former security lead at Kessel Run, and just an incredible human with great perspectives on this. So everybody, Angel.
Hello. Are you sitting?
And this is a unique format. I've never done this before. I don't know if you have. We're combining slides and fireside chat, so because there's some pretty dense content here.
Yes, there is.
So first, we want to discuss four main things. Defining what cATO is. You know, will the real cATO please stand up? What is a cATO? Why do we need them? That's one. What we have to do, how we do it, and then if we have time, I want to run through a retro with Angel and see where we land there. So first, let's start with cATO defined and the why.
So I think it's really important to think about why a cATO even happened. How many people in the room have read 853? Oh, okay. How many people have read 837? Okay, a lot less than I really wanted. So if you actually read those documents, it defines what a cATO is without saying it's a cATO. cATO is just a way of saying we have to continuously do RMF. And I know that I'm right when I see the traditional security folks in here shaking their head that are leaning forward in this aspect. But it didn't work. And the reason why it didn't work, a normal ATO process and a cATO had to come to light, I think mainly was because an ISM, a great example is my friend Colton over there, he was an ISM. How many programs were you in charge of when you were an ISM? 46 programs. And there's about 800-ish controls that you have to answer, and then with all of the subcontrols, there's about 3,000 that you have to answer. For 46 programs, 3,000 controls each, you're going to get a 1-year ATO, 2-year ATO, 3-year ATO. I'll see you in 3 years. Because it's completely unfeasible to have you go through and do that all the time. So if cATO had to come to light to assess the processes to allow it to continuously to happen, because we created this in some way, shape, or form in the government, we created this restriction around personnel that wasn't allowed to let RMF do the way it was supposed to be done, actually.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing that is important to highlight is you actually can't find continuous ATO anywhere in any documentation, except for the new DoD CIO memo that came out. And why that is it was just a branded term that we came up with, actually, for what's up here, which is ongoing authorization. And it was a bad choice, one that I have to take credit for. But it put the focus on the ATO being continuous instead of the RMF process being continuous, which is what we were really doing. And I think that distinction is super important. And what you're highlighting there is to be able to do that continuously, there's a lot of work that has to be done.
But
a lot of work.
I don't think you're wrong in the aspect of you had to kind of do it to break away from that mold to create space for the new growth. You almost had to completely distance yourself to be able to come back and put it together because there was a security culture. Has anyone had to deal with a traditional ISM? Yeah, it's painful, right? It's painful. It's painful. Who has to do EMAS? Exacta? That's painful. It's painful to go through that process. It's painful to continuously update it. So you had to move completely away from it and then be able to come back and look at it with a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah, I agree. But the one thing that we didn't do well was document it.
Oh, that's for sure.
Sorry.
That's for sure.
Angel had to deal with my lack of documentation. And, it is important, though, because I think a lot of the community has come to believe that continuous ATO is a way to get away from having to do RMF. And in fact, in practice, you're seeing that in some software factories, which is really unfortunate, and why I think the DoD CIO memo came out, was to clean up some of that. But it's a lot of work. Like, if you can't do a regular, traditional 3-year ATO, you cannot do a continuous ATO. It's more work, more involved. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree. And I think people have this. So cATOs shouldn't really have an expiration date, but they should have review dates. And it shouldn't mean, hey, everything halts to the end. Because if you've ever done a traditional ATO, you know that 6 months right before your ATO, like production goes significantly down. 3 months before that ATO, like your platform teams are not working on any new features. Your platform teams are specifically focused on updating and getting a snapshot in time, holding it together, right, Colton? Holding it together. And then the minute that ATO is granted, it all goes stagnant and stale for 3 years or a year.
Yeah, and I think those timelines are kind of generous. Because like one thing that I saw in the operations community, and this really gets into the why, we saw a lot of this. I forecasted this earlier, but like I was a targeteer and I saw some of the worst of the worst. The incident that actually drove me to leave and go to procurement and start Kessel Run was the Kunduz Hospital incident. And a lot of things went wrong that day. I can't say that like software is to blame, and certainly it's only a footnote in the official report. But like there were known issues with targeting software that we were using that had been sitting on the shelf for years waiting to go through this ATO process, because there's also a queuing problem, right? When you get that many systems that you're trying to get through, yeah, maybe the process itself only takes 3 months, 6 months if the system has a lot of deficiencies, but it takes 3 years to even start the review. And so we consistently would find that there were features and bug fixes even, and security patches that were being held up by the ATO process. And so one of the things that I always harp on is that our highest priority has to be to satisfy the user, and that applies to security as well. And so getting into this mindset of, security, your job is also to continuously deliver valuable software. How are you enabling that versus taking a strict, siloed security approach? What kind of approaches, especially leading security professionals, what have you found effective ways to get them in that mindset?
So security is a team sport, and really you have a segmented security team, but it really belongs to everyone. If you're a platform engineer, you're responsible for the controls, not your ISM, not your security folks. It's your responsibility to go through and update those. Similar to app teams, at Kessel Run we had Pivotal Tracker. We used a product called SD Elements. You'd push your controls into your backlog. You, as an app team, would be able to go through and do that. You need to do the same on the platform side as well. The platform team needs to be responsible for it. Your platform team should be updating those controls and reviewing those controls consistently. And I think one of the biggest problems is that that's just not happening. So it's not happening in the traditional sense. So one thing that we do is we make sure that, one, our platform team is well educated that they have to update controls. We have a mechanism to go back through and review controls every 30, 60, 90 days, similar to how we do with application teams, and then explaining the why. So they really understand, why am I doing this thing? I'm not just answering a control to answer a control. It's helping you actually secure your system. It's helping you build a more robust system. And if it's not working, then take that control, talk with your ISM, explain why it doesn't work in your environment, and find a way to mitigate it, or find a way to have your ISM or your AO accept the risk on it. Because the other part of that is we have to be able to accept risk, and we have to have a good risk appetite so that we can let the bugs or the critical patches go out sooner rather than later, because the impact of having that fixed in a system versus, we didn't do a full security assessment on this small little bug feature, you have to be able to measure that risk.
Yeah, I like that. We have 2 rules that I always push people to harp on, and one is you can't compare intents to outcomes. So in that risk conversation, a lot of times when you're in a change management process and you're the change agent, everybody in the traditional system wants to compare their intents behind everything they do to your outcomes. And so you get these things and we're even guilty of it, I do it sometimes too, is saying we need to take more risk. actually what we're proposing in this model is actually less risky, far less risky than the system is today. It's just a question of like, are we actually talking about the outcomes of the way we do business today or our intentions? Because the outcomes are pretty poor.
Yeah, they are.
So let's get into what we have to do here. I'm going to go through this quickly because we've hit on these themes, right? But we're really talking about how do we enable rapid outcomes in prod. So the whole path to production and everybody involved in it, including security professionals, but there are a lot more, tests, QA, there are acquisitions folks that involve laws that we have to follow. We have to get everybody aligned to how are we creating outcomes in prod. And one thing I want to say about continuous delivery, this is a definition from the book, Continuous Delivery, is that it's the ability to get changes of any kind into production safely, quickly, and sustainably. So again, we're not asking security professionals or anyone else to take on more risk. In fact, I think we can actually reduce it. And I touched on this earlier, but there's a lot of myths about why it won't work here. It's really about culture and architecture. So I want to focus our conversation on those two things. You mentioned platform. Can you kind of talk to me about architecture and the role that it plays in being able to have common control inheritance and reduce some of that burden of the 800 controls plus 3,000 implementation details for each system?
So for a platform team to be able to have the infrastructure already done allows the application team to not have to worry about it, right? So like as an app team, you can focus on your app. You can focus on, I think, what do you have here? 120 controls, right? That's referencing the app teams. That's very important because you can put that in the back of your mind. You don't have to worry about it. It's divided up. Having a platform team that is responsible for those controls, every application team that rides on that platform can inherit those controls. So what that allows, like your ISM to be able to do is it allows someone, again, like my friend Colton in the background, previous job, you've moved on, I know, I'm just going to use you as a bad reference. It allows your ISM to be able to say, all my platforms across look the same. It's extremely important. For your platform team to have that stability, you can have 200 applications coming through your platform, and that's great. Your ISM doesn't have to look at those other sets of controls. So having that done correctly, and then having all of your applications being able to ride on top of it, that only have to answer 120 controls, makes everyone's life so much easier.
Yeah. I'm curious if you've run across this, though. There's a lot of teams that haven't had to do it the old way, especially like Software Factory. I know you have cohorts come through, people that have probably never done this before. Do you also get folks that are complaining? There's also one thing I'll mention. One of the organizations we work with has like a Wizard of Oz effect. They basically have a separate group that does all of this for the app teams. And so the app teams have never been exposed to really having to like deal with controls and get them into EMAS. And so even though we provide all of this, the app teams are like, wait, you want me to answer how many controls? 120? I've never answered any before. So do you come across that, and how do you deal with that?
So at the Army Software Factory, every one of our cohorts has to answer controls, right? Every application team has to answer controls, full stop. You are building an application, you have to answer controls. That's the way we've built it out. A lot of the folks that do work for us actually have an idea about it, whether they've actually entered something in EMAS or they've had to answer a control. They're aware that it's a very robust beast that they then have to figure out how to tame. It's challenging. I would say, particularly at Kessel Run, my time there, we had a lot of people that came into the government, had no idea about answering controls. And I would say I see that less in the Army Software Factory, more where we direct hired right out of industry for a lot of folks. And that was alarming. They were like, what do you mean I have to answer controls? I've never had to do this before. What do you mean I have to get software approved before I bring in certain pieces of software? This was very new to all of them. And it takes time, and it takes some understanding to be able to say, well, you're not responsible for 3,000, you've only got 120. I mean, saying that is like, you try to make them feel a little bit better. Like, well, you could go answer 3,000, or you could just answer 120, but they're like, still 120, you want me to answer that? And I think that's where having starter apps is great for software factories, so that you can have a starter app that you would build on, maybe that has 100 controls that it's answered for already, and then an app team would only have to answer maybe 30.
Yeah, I like that. We've had some experience with that. I think that one interesting problem that results from that, it's kind of like people that learn math using a calculator, and then they can't go back, and they miss that experience. So have you, and maybe the answer is no, but have you found a way to maybe address some of that security education that would have happened if they hadn't had a starter app? Or do you even think that's valuable?
I don't think it's valuable, truthfully. I don't think it is, because I think we need to work in a way of automation and create more automation. I think it's great to know the historical context, go read those documents, understand it, so that you can understand how you can improve it, because that's ultimately what we want. We want to improve upon this process. We don't want to do things the old way. I don't want any of you in this room having to go answer 800 or 3,000 controls. Like, I'm sorry if you really have to. Like, if you've got to start from scratch, like, I wish you all the best. Someone bring you Starbucks. Like, that's rough. But I don't want that. I want everyone to be able to work off of automation, but understand why we're doing this. So if you understand the why are we doing a cATO? Why are we answering less controls? They will have more awareness around, they'll maybe have more sympathy for the platform team and or the security team or the other development teams that are trying to work on a starter app or want to add in a new feature to the starter app with each other. But I don't think that I don't want to ever see anyone go back.
So speaking of that, we just recently did that. And so like when you're going into new organizations, that can be a real challenge, right? And one thing I want to say about it first, no matter where you are, and if you're a company that's trying to sell commercial products to the government, is like, it seems really daunting, but you can lock yourself in a room, and I recommend like locking, well, I say locking, that sounds awful, but like getting in the room with your ISM and some security controls assessors and the engineers who are building the things, specifically the things that we're looking at, and if it's a platform, that could be like 4 or 5 teams worth, and we rotate through each component, but just sit down and do the work. The biggest barrier that I have seen to people getting continuous ATOs is nobody's willing to sit down, because people haven't done it in a long time. A lot of 3-year ATOs were a 3-year, they trace back like 10 years, and I've come across so many ISMs that have never done a full stack, 1,300 or however many controls, depending on what level you're at. They haven't done that work. And so I would just recommend, just do the work. I've seen it get done in a week, and you can do it. And what I like about, this is a real example, by the way, of a project we're working on, and about 70% of the controls are inherited by the applications. And there are some hybrid controls in there as well. But one thing that's important to note too is your platform shouldn't be stagnant. And it's not just, Gene talked about platforms from a technical perspective and how they enable teams to move faster and have higher quality and a whole number of things. They also reduce the amount of time. If you have 20 teams and every single one of them is focusing on, building their cluster, that's 20 teams worth of waste that you could just provide that as a service. Now those teams don't have to do that. But your platform, you actually want to make it more opinionated, not less. I take a lot of flack for that position because there's a big movement, particularly in the Air Force, to move towards like, no, we need ultimate flexibility, like we need Kubernetes like in the raw and just let dev teams go. And I can't wait for Cornelia to talk about cloud native platforms, but has your experience been similar that more opinionation is good, not only from a controls perspective, but like the teams in general are able to produce better value, sooner, safer, happier? And do you think there's like too much opinionation?
I think it's good to have an opinion, and I think that it helps paint the picture to your authorizing official and to your ISMs. So your ISM's responsible for the program, and your authorizing official gives you the ATO. And I think if you can paint that picture and be very opinionated in it, it helps them understand where you're going in what direction. Where you don't fill out the controls and you don't really have an opinion, you're just kind of putting what you need to put in there to get by. It doesn't allow them to understand the real risk that they're taking and or what risks they can take with you. And I think that's the biggest thing. They want to be able to take risks. They want to be able to enable you. Majority of the AOs and a majority of the ISMs want to empower teams to get to production. But when you try to, we're going to hide it from security, and you have no opinions, well, they're going to make an opinion for you. And your opinions, you're not going to go to prod.
Yes. All right. Let's put a pin in that and move on to culture. And I'm going to let you kind of freeform this one, but you've talked about risk management, and that we need to properly measure and balance risk and be able to make informed risk decisions. What do you see as some of the cultural elements of that, specific to the security community? Either things that are healthy right now or things that need to change? It was very broad, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so at the Army Software Factory, I think what's really healthy is that we have a ton of signal and cyber officers. So that's really helpful for us because they understand the risk. They understand where it is, where it's not, when to raise an issue, when not to raise an issue. I think some of the unhealthy culture I've seen is let's just not tell security about it, because if we don't tell them, they're not going to know, and then we don't have to go do it. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that I have seen, and that happened quite a bit. And then security goes off and finds things, and then people say, oh, well, that's not really a big deal. And you're like, well, it kind of is in the grand scheme of things. Like, it puts everything together. And whether it be if you look at security as an adversary instead of people that are here to help you go faster and they're here to empower you to go faster, like, sit down and get to know your security folks. They're usually here because they want to find a way to yes with you instead of just no and then move on. And if they say no and then move on, you probably have a bad security person, and I'm sorry for you. You need to go find someone else that's going to be your enabler. But most security people want you to go faster. I think the unhealthy culture really goes towards, let's just not tell security that. Let's not answer that. Let's kind of go off and do our own thing. Let's go grab software that we shouldn't be using. And then when asked about it, you try to hide it and deny it from security. We're like, hey, listen, if you want to bring that in, we could have vetted it for you. We could have helped you. You could have helped us. We could have helped you. We could have moved forward with it. I can't speak for the Air Force side, but I can speak for the Army Software Factory side and the ECMA side, that I think that security is really embedded into the entire process with the application teams and with the platform teams, and very much leaning forward into that. And that's a different dynamic than I have seen before.
That's nice. I haven't seen it very often. Like flip side of that, what about, you talked about like developer culture towards security. What about security culture towards developers or product teams?
So I think everyone that works in this environment, it should be a security professional. I think you should all consider yourself security professionals. If you're a developer, you're a secure developer. If you're a UX designer, you're a secure UX designer. You shouldn't be designing things or building things that are insecure. That's just, why would you want to do that? Not everyone thinks that way. Security is a shared responsibility. We all have this responsibility to keep us safe and secure. I think that's like the biggest thing that I see. Like it's a shared thing. I think with the security teams that we have, one of the teams that we have is an application security validation engineers. We are building out, so within ECMA, we are building out all of the security automation to deliver to Big Army. And so we want to empower every team that comes in through Create, which is our environment, to be able to go faster, right? That's our goal. With automation, with secure automation, how do we continuously go down this path together? So we meet with them, we talk with them, we meet with a new team, they're like, oh, security professionals. And like within 5 minutes of talking to them, they're like, oh, hey, you're not like normal security professionals. You guys are nice. And I think that's that culture, that trying to change that and understand, like, we are here to help you and empower you so you can go faster, so that you don't develop something and when you're about to push to production, we run your scans and then we say, yeah, we can't let you go. Here's why. Like, that's the most disheartening thing. So we've got to start it from up front. And so the minute we have at the software factory, the minute a team has a name, like literally has a name, we're like, hey, want to be friends? We invite them into our channel. We start meeting with them. We have the conversations with them, and they understand what our goals are and our mission is.
All right. I think, so just to recap, right, we talked a little bit about architecture. You need to architect for common controls inheritance. We'll talk a little bit about how you can do that in a second, but that seems really important. And then the culture has to shift from one of like manual human review. You've talked about automation a lot. We'll get into some of that as well. And then also some cultural aspects about, and I'm hearing like fragments of Janice's talk about leveraging the brains and making sure that we're being kind and like reaching out and collaborating. So let's shift gears and talk about then how we can implement some of these things. I think one thing that I want to highlight before we get into this, when we were talking about this talk, we were discussing like SD elements and all these tools, and you're like, yeah, but you could do that with like a really bad, a really awesome spreadsheet. Tell me about that. Like, how we've come up with some prescribed ways to do this, and a lot of us have used SD elements in particular, but what are some of the like fundamentals before we get into like tools? Okay,
so if you have money and you're like, I want to go buy a product that can help me do my controls, go out and get SD elements. It's very expensive. Sorry if anyone from SD elements is in here. Your product is expensive. You can get a really nice, beautiful Excel spreadsheet Please don't shoot me. Because I know I just said like something very triggering, get a beautiful Excel spreadsheet that has all the controls, that has everything you need in it, the date that the control was answered, who's responsible, and break it out and be able to give this to everyone. Have the little tabs at the bottom, put all your fun colors in there so you understand what you're actually answering. When you understand what you're actually answering and why, if there are things that every product team is answering that you can put back into the main spreadsheet, so when you give it to a team, they read it, they say, oh, I need to do this. Oh, that's the why. They will be able to go implement it easily. SD Elements kind of automates that process for you. So if you're like, how do I do this? Like, start with downloading all the controls. Get the XSUM, get it together, be able to start to answer the controls. And then if you can integrate tools and automate it so you're not answering it on an Excel spreadsheet, that's great. That's more money, right? Like, we all have budget constraints. We all have resource constraints. We all have implementation constraints, because then it's like, are you using a SaaS or are you using an on-prem product? There's a lot of variables there, so we default to the beautiful Excel spreadsheet.
I like it. And one thing, fun fact, by the way, Kessel Run, when we got our continuous ATO, which was 5 years ago now, seems crazy, we had just implemented SD Elements, like just implemented, but all of the data that we used to convince Lauren to sign it was actually based on work we had done in Excel spreadsheets that were stored in our Git repository.
So I wouldn't say you convinced Lauren. I'd say you proved to Lauren why you should do it. Because I think that's the biggest thing. People think they need to go convince their AO, authorizing official, to do a thing. You actually need to prove why you need to do it. Get them to believe in you so that they will buy in on your risk, because you are showing them that you can do the work. And that's what you did at Kessel Run. You really proved that you could go do this to Lauren.
Yeah, the teams did. I didn't do much. So, okay, we discussed this, right? We want to inherit controls, and we want to maximize that. And once we have that architecture to deploy apps on, we have this app development process. So on the right here, you've got, this is an example of a new team starting. So they just got their name, and they're doing their design sprint or discovery and framing. And this is from Kessel Run, so are there any changes, first of all, that you've made it, or additional steps that you would advocate for besides what we've listed out here, like the education process, initially meeting with teams? Maybe not just education, but you said relationship building.
Yeah, so right at the front, discovery, the minute a team stood up, meet with them. Say, hey, we want to know what your problem set is. If you take 10 minutes to meet with them, we have office hours. We invite everyone to come into our office hours. Come in, chat with us, let us know what you're doing, how we can help you. Maybe we know another application within Create that's doing a similar thing. Maybe we can have you go talk to them. A lot of the times we're all doing similar things. We're not doing too much. And having that relationship up front is something that I think we're super successful at.
Okay.
So education, meet and greet. Like, the minute discovery happens, I have a slide that says discovery, and then I have meet and greet. So I meet you the minute you are going into discovery.
All right. You mentioned SD Elements being expensive, and hey, you can do this manually. And by the way, there's this story of continuous delivery that I always like, where I think it was Jez Humble describes, and it's actually somebody else's work, but he describes setting up a CI pipeline with a rubber chicken in an old computer. So you can do a lot of these things low tech, but in what you described, there's still a lot of toil. So we typically advocate to our clients, if they can afford it, to use something like SD Elements, because it comes with security education built in, a lot of integrations, to being able to push those stories into developers' backlogs, create a traceable identifier, and actually make it so that you can't ship to prod unless you've answered your controls, which is important. And then one of the elements that we have here, we on our most recent project used Sneak and Aqua, which is different than what we had used in past projects. And I told the team, go back to the drawing board. I used to say all these scanner tools are created equal, and I found that is not the case when it comes to toil, and in particular integration and how they fit into your workflows. So are there any other tools that you would recommend people look at? Sneak, obviously they're sponsoring, so I'm biased, but really great tool, and Aqua's been really great for us. But what else are you seeing?
Fortify is a great one.
Yeah?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah. I mean, it's reliable, it's stable. Sorry, I'm probably not. Other than Fortify, I'm probably not going to name names and vendors. We can talk offline about it. I don't want to endorse any of them. I think they all have their very unique aspects of it. But there's a lot out there, and what I would say is get a demo. If you're interested in all of these, get a demo. Find out, are they on-prem or are they not on-prem? Where are they hosted? Ask all of the questions that you want to ask. Get them up front. Start talking to them. Have they gone through their own control set? Have they they're selling you a security thing, have they secured themselves? Ask for their security documentation. And if it's just a PDF, ask for more. Like, do not be afraid to ask for more. If they just send you a PDF, they should be sending you controls. They should be sending you architectural diagrams. They should be able to tell you where they're hosted or how you have to deploy it into what type of environment. So, like, dig deep.
What's the first question you always ask vendors?
Where are your controls? Like,
Show
if
me
you want
your
to sell me
controls.
anything, and I say probably in like every talk I do, if you want to sell me anything, just email me the controls. I sleep about 3 hours a night, and I am up late reading government documentation and security documentation. And I know some of you are like laughing in this room because you've received those latent messages from me, and you're like, yes, she never sleeps. I love reading security documentation. So like, send me your controls. I want to know.
I love it. I love it. All right, so I'm just going to hit security pipeline really quickly because I feel like we over-rotate on pipelines. Like, everybody treats them like they're magic, and they're not. They're also not universal. You have to create a lot of unique pipelines for a lot of unique technologies and things you're trying to do. And so the thing I would say here is just make sure that your security pipeline enforces good security practices and good release practices. And figure out a way to enforce that. I've seen it done by centralization, where you force teams to accept that as a dependency. It's like typically viewed as an anti-practice in DevOps to a degree. So I've seen other teams implement it as a pattern with checking mechanisms. There's different ways you can do that, but it needs to be done. What I want to ask you about with the minute we have remaining is about periodic control and scan review. This has been the hardest thing for the software factories, and you only have a minute. Tell me how we fix this problem in continuous RMF of actually doing this step well.
Okay, scan reviews. So are we talking about like an app team's running their scans?
That and just continuous monitoring in general, like making sure we're actually following up on a control. Like, you went through your initial, you got your initial continuous ATO, shipped your app, and then you never look at your controls again.
Well, if you've spoken to any senior leaders about the documentation they're writing for continuous ATO, I've probably pitched them the same spiel. You need to have I would say 30, 60, 90 days of controls. They should rotate out. That's the easiest thing that you can do right now. If you're living off an Excel spreadsheet, you should be able to put dates, group them out. You know you have to check every 30 days. After you've checked it, move it to the back of the box. Check it again in 90 days. If you don't have a better mechanism, there are some actual vendors that I have asked to check things in the background and then alert, because that would be great to create more automation. But what you should do is you should be able to review your scans at all point in times. You should be able to check your controls. You shouldn't ever have a control that's more out of date than 90 days. That's just the reality. If your control's out of date than more than 90 days, you have a problem. And you should at least be going in and looking at it and saying, yep, that's valid, and check it out. Check it in, check it out. Say that you've checked it and there's been eyes on it.
All right. Well, that's time. We're not going to get to do a retro, but that was a great answer to that one because I haven't heard people answer that one well, and I think there's a lot of work to do in that area, so I'm excited to watch Army Software Factory. You should reach out, by the way, if you're in government and you have questions. They're pioneering a lot of new ground in the continuous RMF space. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Angel. A round of applause for Angel, please.